thanks, Laurie. And yes, it has been a long time. I remember all the way back to San Diego when I came there for a workshop, and I met you and Tony Cabell, and we went out to eat and had a great time and got to meet some of the staff over there. A lot of changes since then. And I've always stuck with Nik because I like a lot of their programs in their color effects, and I like the Viveza, how it works. I've been doing this full time for 16 years, teaching macro workshops and all over the country and speaking at photo conferences. And a lot of you that are here today have probably seen me over the years, and you may have even seen my images and wondered how I process them, because they don't look, a lot of my images don't look like what they do when they come out of the camera, and that's due to all the cool filters that we have to work with in color effects. And I use a lot of those different filters, and I'm going to show you those today. I'm going to walk you through some of the images that you may have seen that I've posted over the years and wondered how I did that. And so some of these you're going to see today. All right, so I'm going to turn off my image so you can see the screen better.
And Mike, before we get started, I want everyone to know, if you didn't read in the intro, that he is actually using Photoshop Elements on a Windows machine. But once he gets into Viveza and Color Efex, it should look identical, no matter if you're on Photoshop or, let's say, Lightroom. So I just want to let everybody know that. Thanks.
Yeah, I have always used Elements. I've never used the full-blown Photoshop or Lightroom. I've always gotten what I needed out of the Elements program, so I never was interested in paying that $9.95 or whatever it is a month to have the other programs. And I tend to use a lot of programs that offer filters like the Color Efex. So most of my work is done in Elements as far as simple cloning and cropping and things like that. Now, I'm going to show you some of my favorite filters that I use in Color Efex, and then I'm also going to take you into Viveza, and I'm going to kind of show you some of the new things that have been added into the upgraded Viveza 4, and it's been some pretty cool features that they've added in there. I'm going to start off with the Color Efex, and I'm going to pull up an image here that, let me see, where is it? Little things in my, there it is. It's been hidden by my little Viveza and Color Efex box here. So now I shoot a lot of images that have a lot of nice texture to them. I love texture in my images, and there is a filter that I use in Color Efex. Now you can click on the Color Efex box like you saw, but also I'm going to show you a different way you can get in here if you don't like to have that box. I usually eliminate the little box on the right side, and I'll show you how I get in through another way. Now, I'm going to say this on probably a lot of these filters. This is my favorite filter, but because there's so many of them here that I really, really like and I use a lot. But the one that I want to start off with is called Detail Extractor. Now, as you can see here, there is a lot of different options for different types of filters that you can apply. And when I started with Color Efex, I actually just went through and looked at all the different filters I'd click on and just move on down the different filters here and just see what it did to my image. Now, a lot of people, when I would show this program to them in my workshops, they never realized, a lot of them didn't realize that there was actually a little box over on the right side that when you clicked on it, it brought up more filters underneath. All right, so we could go in and look at all these different options. So like this Brilliance Warmth actually changes the colors. As you click on each one, you'll see the colors change on the image, different tones and different colors. And so remember that when you start using these filters, that there are more filters underneath. And so if you go to, say, contrast only, click on that, again, you're going to see more options that you can click on. And I love filters. I love just being able to just go through and click on filters with my mouse, and I don't have to, like a lot of these filters that they've created, you can actually do with contrast and saturation and brightness and different things that you can do just by making adjustments yourself, but they're already pre-adjusted for you, and that's what I like. It's just real simple going through and clicking. Now, the one that I like to use a lot, and you're going to see a huge difference in some of these images, is the detail extractor. So we go to the box on the right and pull those up. You're going to get 4 options here. Now, the very first one on the top, when you click on it, you'll see just a little bit more detail within that front end of that car that's going to pop out there. And if we hit the compare button, there's the original, and you'll see a little bit of that detail start to pop out. Now, if we go to the next one, it's going to actually just pull out a little more detail. So you're going to see, again, as I compare, go back to original, and then there's the filter. You see a little bit more. Now, this third one reminds me of HDR. Remember that real kind of cartoonish looking? And so now it's really pulling out tons of detail, but then you get down to the bottom one, and that is the most extreme. That is an amazing difference from that to that. Now, I always like to go to the bottom one, the most extreme, and then I'll go over to the right side where you have all your sliders, and then I'll actually go and start pulling back on the detail extractor. So you see, I can actually take it down quite a bit, or I can leave it up, and then you can hit the contrast slider and take it down. So you have the ability now to make the adjustment so that you can get it to exactly where you want it. But when you look at the difference between that out of the camera and the detail that has been pulled out with that, that is an amazing amount of detail that's coming out. So all that beautiful texture is popping out of there. So again, if we went to the original, probably up more around here. And again, that's probably a little bit too extreme. And so then again, I can always back this off on the detail extractor, back off the contrast. And if I wanted to, I could bring up more of the saturation, or take the saturation down to almost black and white, or is black and white basically. So that's pretty cool. Now, there are other things that I can do, which I'm going to show you in another image, where we can use control points and minus areas if we don't want it in a certain area. Now, that's one example. I'm going to go back and show you some other images here where I was able to kind of, like I say, pull out all that really fine details with that detail extractor. This is an image here of some shells that I shot. Is down in Florida at Anastasia Beach, and there was all these beautiful shells all over. And this is the image out of the camera. Now, those of you who follow me have probably heard that I shoot JPEGs. All right, and I know you're all sitting there scratching your head and thinking, why would you do that? There's a long story on, when I started in 2004, because a 1 gig card cost $250. My computer was really slow and I couldn't process large files, so I was shooting JPEGs, and I started getting images published in magazines, and I was getting sponsors coming in, and I was asked to speak at conferences and workshops and stuff. So my JPEGs were working fine. So I still to this day still shoot JPEG. So this image right here is pretty bland looking out of the camera, even though it is a JPEG. Nothing's been done to it, but it's still pretty bland looking. There's not a lot of nice colors and details that are being pulled out. Now, I mentioned I don't like this box here. Okay, it is here, and you can go in and actually go into your different groups here by clicking on them, but I actually like to click that off. I don't like seeing the box there. I can go into filter and then go down to my Nik Collection, and then go into my color effects. So that's how I use it. I don't like that little box in my way all the time. All right, so we're gonna go back to that detail extractor, and I'm gonna show a few different images with this, because it's just such an amazing transformation. Again, so we'll click the first one, click the second, again, see a little more color starting to pop, and then we click that last one down at the bottom, and then we get the most extreme. Now, that is an amazing transformation from that, where you can just see some of the shells with some of the faint colors and the lines to bring that kind of color out of there. So it's identifying those blues and reds and different colors, and then just overemphasizing it and really popping those colors. And at the same time, you're getting all that detail that's coming out. Now, again, that's a little bit too extreme. So what I would do is I would take the detail extractor down and then start pulling back on the contrast and get it down to more of a normal looking image. Now, again, you could leave it like you saw it there, really extreme, and sometimes that works out okay. But I usually tend to go to that bottom one because it is the most extreme, and then I'll just back off the controls to get to where I want it. All right. Some people might just go with the second filter and say that looks good right there. But I actually like playing around with the sliders and moving them back and forth and getting it to where I want it. Now, I mentioned earlier about you have these control points and you have a minus control point because there's sometimes you may want to not use that filter into a certain area of an image. So on this area right in here, that shell, when we go back to or that starfish, when we go back, it's a black color, but you see when I added the detail extractor, it turned it to a purple color. So what we can do is go in here and hit this little minus over here, and all you do is left click it on your mouse, and then you drag it over, and you can put it right on this area in the center here, and then it removes the detail extractor from that area there. And then you have a slider here that you can slide out so that we get the whole starfish in there. And then they also have a opacity slider here. So let's say I wanted to have a little bit of the purple in there, or I could go to 100%, but I want to back it off so that I get that black color, which is originally what it should be. So that's the slider. I'll use it again in another image or two where I'm going to remove the filter from certain areas in an image. Okay. But it's quite a transformation from going from the original out of the camera to that right there. So we're going to cancel out on this one, and I'm going to show you another one that was an amazing transformation that I found with that. These buttons, and again, they look okay, but a lot of these white color buttons here, when you see what I've done in the detail extractor, it just amazingly pulls in shadows and different colors in there. It's really cool how it works. So there's the first one, and you see a little more color coming in, and then we get the kind of, like I say, it kind of looks like HDR, and then the real extreme one. And again, I would go up here and I would start to back it off. Again, we'll look at the compared. There's the original out of the camera. And you can see on these white buttons how it created almost a shadow effect, which gives it some dimension to it. It's more of a 3D look opposed to just where it's kind of washed out. It starts to create some definition in there. And again, the colors just kind of pop. So I like that filter a lot, and I use it quite often on some of my images to really pull out all that nice detail and textures, and I think that one's a really fun filter. Now, if you go to my website, you will see an image on there that is my main image on my website, and I've had people say to me, like, out of all your images, which one would you say would be your favorite image out of all your images? And I would say it's this one here. Now, if it was just this image that you see here with a little bit of sharpening and contrast boost and a little bit of sharpening, I probably, and maybe a little saturation, I probably would not say that this is my favorite image out of all my images. But there's a filter in Color Efex that turned this into a totally different image, and it became my favorite of all my images, and that's why you see it as my opening image on my website. Now, this is a filter that I remember way back when Nik was owned by the people in San Diego there, that there was a filter in here that almost nobody used, and because it's a filter that very rarely works on most images. And I remember Lori saying at the one time that she thought that I was like the only one that was using this filter, because most people would say they just couldn't seem to get it to work on any of their images. Now, it's called Solarization. And I didn't know this, but somebody in one of my programs I was doing, a Zoom program for a camera club, had told me that term solarization was from the when you would process your film back in the days when we were using film and you did your own processing in your basement. What they would do is during the processing of the film, if you would turn on the light in the room and turn it off, it would create this weird look, and that was called solarization. Well, I had no idea because I wasn't shooting in the film days, and the only 2 years that I shot film were slides that I had processed by a company. So I never got into doing my own processing of my images. So that was a term, again, that was used back in the days where people were actually processing their images, and again, somehow they said they turned on a light and it created this effect in the image that was kind of cool, I guess, and that's why they called it a solarization filter or something. But if you go to the right side here, click on the box, you're going to see, and this is what I was talking about, it creates a really bizarre looking image, right? I mean, again, most images that you use this for, people look at it and go, well, that's ridiculous looking. But what I liked is this one here. I thought, wow, that is very cool how that transformed that image from this to that. It's just very dramatic. Now these things are kind of emerging out of a black hole now, and I just thought, oh my God, that is so cool looking. So I was pretty happy with that. Now they have, again, just like all the filters we pop up, there's going to be sliders over here, and you can adjust the sliders to get a different look by just sliding the elapsed time back and forth. Take it to black almost. So I'm going to get it to right about there, and that looks pretty good. And then you have a saturation too. You can see all the blues that are popping out of there. I don't really care for that too much. I kind of like it more with some slight blue in there, but not a lot. You also have these little drop down filters here, so you could actually create different looks. It just gives you different looks with these different filters and colors and stuff. You get some black and whites. All right, so we're just going to leave it at where it was. All right, so that is the first step that I did on this image, because we're going to do some other things with this image. So we click OK. And that's going to take me back into my elements, which is going to add that filter. Now, there's some areas in here that I want to brighten up. So you see down here, these two are kind of dark, and I want to lighten those up. And then you see up here, I want to lighten these up. So we're going to go into the Viveza program. I love Viveza. Ever since I found it way back when Nik came out, I was like, it makes my life so easy. Now, on the left side, this is new. Okay, so this is the brand new Viveza 4, and you can see on the left side, they've got creative filters. So now you can go through and see if you like any of these filters. And it's so far, I haven't used it where I've seen anything that I wanted to use in the filters, but that doesn't mean that, you know, you might not find something that might change the look of your image that you might like. So that's a new feature there. Now at the top here, you see you've got brightness, contrast, saturation, structure, shadow, warmth, red, green, blue, and hue. And those are global adjustments. So we can go through here and globally adjust your image with those. If you want to just do some basic, you know, like you do in Lightroom or Photoshop, just basic controls for brightness, contrast, saturation, structure. Structure is actually like a sharpening tool. Then they added on some, down here you see highlights, mid-tone, shadows, so more adjustments that you can use. I don't really use any of that on the top portion. I use this mainly for going in and making adjustments in areas of my image where I want to lighten areas, darken areas, change colors, things like that. And that's going to be done through the control point. Control point is right here now. And in order to create a control point, I want to left click on my mouse right here, and then I'm going to drag it over. And you see this little white area right here on the edge of that little guy there. I'm going to drop it right there. Now you have this circle here. Now I always would try to get this little guy right here to adjust my circle, and I found it kind of hard. Sometimes I couldn't always get the little cursor right on there. And Lori actually showed me that you can just go on the edge here, and then you can expand your circle by just going to the edge and grabbing it. So I find that much easier. Now I want to adjust these two guys down here, and I want to brighten them. So once I drop that control point down below, you'll see now we have more sliders that are also brightness, contrast, saturation, structure, shadow, warmth, red, green, blue, and hue. And that is going to be able to control inside this control point. Now that area that I dropped it on is a little area of white. And so when we drop that control point anywhere in an image, it's going to evaluate the color that it sits on and also some of the texture in there. And then anything within that circle, it's going to adjust that color. But if it's not that color, then it won't affect it, okay? So we're going to go over here. I'm going to brighten that area up there. So I'm going to take my brightness slider and just brighten that up. See? Isn't that cool? Now, it's got a little bit of a more bluish tone than the rest of the images. So we're going to go in, and I'm just going to take the saturation slider, and I'm going to back that off so that we bring, some of that saturation out of there. And we could actually go into our blue slider here and take some of it down that way too. But let's go to the compare now. And you can see how dark it is and how I brighten it up. So it's a little bit better as far as matching up with some of the others. These two guys right here are a little bit on the dark side too. So what we're going to do is go in and grab another control point, so we can hit another control point and come up here and drop it again on any of that little white area around there. And then we're going to take our circle out so it kind of takes into this bottom one here. Now it's going to affect some of this in here, but I'm going to show you a little bit later how you can control that too, because that's one of the new features also that's in here. So we're going to go down again to our brightness, and we're going to brighten that up. And then again, as you can see, it's gotten a lot of blue in there. So we're going to take the saturation out, and that tones that down. So again, it matches up with the rest of it. Now you can also name these control points. So you see I've got this open right here. When you see that circle like that, that means that control point's open, and it's lit up right here, and that's control point 2, which was my second one. Now you can double click on that, and then you can add in a name in there. So I could add in whatever name I wanted to. What am I going to call that? Upper right. Upper right. Okay. And so that would be the upper right control point. And then if I want to do lower left control point, I could double click on here and then add the name lower left control point. If I wanted to go, and I could just click on these different ones, it would take me right to that control point. All right, so that is what I wanted to accomplish in Viveza. And I'm going to show you other images where I'm going to take you into Viveza and do different things. And now you can see that it's going to brighten up those areas. Now, one thing I don't like about images, I don't like gaps. You can see a gap here and a gap there. So what I'm gonna do is hit my cloning tool, and I'm gonna go over here, and I'm just gonna hit my Alt button, left click on my mouse, grab that, pull it up here, copy it there, and then just grab it again, pull it down here, and add it there. Now it's coming out a little bit dark, but again, I can always go back into Viveza. I can brighten those areas up. And so that's how I ended up getting that image. And again, I've had, a lot of people ask me, well, how'd you do that? And, I says, well, I used, Solarization and Color Efex. But again, most images don't seem to work very well with that particular filter. Now, I did find one other image. Actually, I do have quite a few different ones that I've used that I've been able to work with it and work out a pretty nice looking image. There's another one. Let's see, where is it? There we go. Now, this is something I shot. Actually, it was at the San Diego Botanical Garden. And we're going to go into Color Efex. And we're going to go back into our Solarization filter. Now this one here, I took the elapsed time. As you can see, you can make it look really strange by moving that elapsed time back. I actually took it all the way over to the right. And again, kind of like that other image where now these spikes are kind of coming out of this black hole. And I thought that was pretty cool how that worked. Now, again, you can go and click on these different, look at the different looks that these different colors and different things will happen when you kind of just scroll down over them. I actually kind of like this. This is the one that I ended up liking. It's kind of a black and white, but I think with the spikes from each one of those little cactuses going different directions, I thought it was a pretty cool look. And again, eliminated all that color that was in the back. Like you go back and compare, you see the greens in the background, but it blacked all that out. And so that, again, I don't know how you do that actually if you were in Photoshop. I suppose there's probably some way to do it, but to me, it was so simple just clicking on a filter and being able to create that look. All right, so let's talk about some of the other cool filters. Now, another filter that I like is called Darken Lighten. Now, there's sometimes when I like to take an image and there's some part of that image that I want to draw your eye into with kind of like a spotlight. And I found in the Color Efex with this Darken Lighten center was something that I could spotlight things. Now, I'm going to start off actually with the low key filter. And I'll show you another couple other images I use low key for, which I like this kind of dark effect. As you can see, I like dark, moody images. All right, so I'm going to darken it first with the low key. Now, what's cool about Color Efex is you can add filters on top of filters. So there's been times when I might have add 2 filters, maybe 3 filters, and you can do that through this little button here. It says Add Filter. So once I click on that, you're going to see at the top here, there's the low key filter right there. And then down below it says empty filter. So I'm going to fill that in. So I got to go back on my back button to get into my filters. Okay. And then we're going to scroll down until we find the Darken Lighten Center right here. Darken Lighten Center. All right. Now over on the right side, you have Place Center. In other words, where we're going to place that spotlight. So we just, again, left click on my mouse to grab that Place Center. If I wanted to put it up here in the corner, I could put the spotlight there. Or if I wanted to put it down here in this corner, whoops, you could do it down there. I'm going to put it right here because I want to pull your eye right to the most interesting part of this little succulent right here where all this cool little detail is. All right, so I'm going to adjust the size of the spotlight. That's another thing we can do. We can see it says center size. We can make the spotlight larger or we can make it really small. I want to make it really small because I want to just have it right in this area right here. Now you have 2 sliders above the center size, and that is center luminosity. All right, now that's going to brighten up that spotlight or darken down that spotlight. I want to brighten it all the way up. I want it really nice and bright. And then the border luminosity is going to take care of anything that's outside of that circle that I placed. So we can lighten or bring it down and make it really dark around the outside. So now all you got is kind of this green glow around the edges of that. Now, with this being brightened up, where does your eye go when you view the image? Right to that most interesting part of that succulent. And again, you got all kinds of controls here. We could adjust. You could actually brighten it up on the outside and darken it in the inside if you wanted to. So that's pretty cool. There's also a way that you can adjust the type of spotlight. So you can see here, you got kind of a square spotlight, or I guess it's supposed to be round, but then you have kind of an oblong one. So you can change the style of the spotlight. So you can see here we've got low key as our first filter, and then we have darken, lighten, center. If we wanted to, we could add more filters and keep going. Obviously, there's so many filters in here, we won't have time to cover, but a few in the time we have. So we're going to cancel that out. All right, so I was in that low key filter, and I mentioned about low key. I've used this quite a bit. This is another image that I used low key on, and again, got that really nice kind of moody, dark look to it. And then I can play again with the contrast. I actually, you know, when I post this image out there on Facebook, and I usually get a lot of compliments on it, people seem to like how the green edges of that plant just kind of glow. Speaking of glow, we actually have a slider said glow. And then we have standard low key, so we can kind of adjust that, darken it more if we wanted, or lighten it up if we want. We got dynamic low key. And then of course your saturation, if you want to back off on the saturation or really bring out the color. I like saturation. I don't want to get it too crazy, so we don't go take it up too much. All right, so that is the low key filter. And I use that quite a bit because, like I say, as you can see, when you compare the image out of the camera right there, and then that, it's a pretty dramatic change. And I like that. I like being able to make something really dramatic looking. Now here's one where I combine the low key with the detail extractor. So again, I went to the dark one, and again, we look at the original, kind of almost where everything kind of washed out a little bit. And then you start to really see the details pop. And again, we're going to click add filter because I want to add a filter. Again, where's our low key? And then we're going to go into the detail extractor. And then it's going to, I think on this one here, I just used the second one. I felt that the second one worked pretty good. If we go to the last one, it kind of washes out everything. You can see it kind of blows out everything. But again, we could always bring it back, you know, if we wanted to. So it's amazing the transformation just with a couple of clicks of a mouse, going from that where again it's just kind of all muddled looking and you don't see the real sharp details, and now you get to really pull out all the details in there and also give that kind of dark look down inside, and you know, which really makes the plant highlight a lot. So that was pretty cool. Now I have an image here that I totally, you know, really screwed up on. As I mentioned earlier, I shoot JPEGs. And so when I shoot JPEGs, I would typically want to adjust my white balance within the camera. And I was shooting this two-headed Gerber daisy. I found this at a florist, and I was pretty excited because it's an unusual flower. It's usually you see a Gerber daisy has one stem and one head. Well, this was fused together with two stems and two heads coming off, and I thought that was really cool. I was actually in a workshop, and I had it at the workshop, and in the morning before the people showed up, I wanted to photograph it for myself. And so I set it up and I put a background behind it. That green background was something I put behind it, and I photographed it and wasn't paying attention to the white balance. Well, I'm in a conference room which has fluorescent lighting over top, and I was in a big hurry because I was running behind, and so I didn't really check the image. I was just shooting and not paying attention. And so when I got it on the computer to do work on it, this is what I saw, and I was totally devastated because I thought, oh my God, this thing is like screwed up big time. I just didn't pay attention on the white balance, and I messed it up really big. So I was really unhappy because that thing is gone now. That flower was dead and in the trash, and I couldn't reshoot this again. So I was pretty upset with myself because I screwed up. I thought, well, maybe there's a filter somewhere that I can use that might help this thing out. So I went into Color Efex. And again, when I started out with Color Efex, because I didn't really know any of the filters on the left side there, I would actually just go through and scroll through every filter and see what would happen, you know. And I mentioned earlier about how solarization doesn't work on very many images. So let me just show you what a solarization would look like on this image here. This is kind of like, again, what most people see when they use solarization on a filter. That's why I was saying most people say, oh, that thing never works on anything. All right, so what I did was, as I was scrolling through these different filters, I came to this one called Bleach Bypass, and we click on that. And when that popped open, I thought, ah, look at that. The color's kind of back to where it was supposed to be. You know, the petals were that kind of, pinkish color, and the greens are back to more green, where opposed to like here, where the reds are kind of blown out and the greens are kind of orangish, and the stem there is kind of turned to orangish. And I thought, oh, that's kind of cool. It kind of helped out a little bit, brought it back. So some of these, these are a little too extreme, these here, but this one here worked out pretty good. It's either the first one or the third. I think this one here is better. So I was starting to feel a little better, because I thought, well, this filter transformed this image from, all screwed up into something that I can kind of work with now. All right, now I still have to do some adjusting here. Now, the contrast in here, I had worked to tone it down a little bit. It got a little too contrasty, so all I did is back that contrast off, see? And now the greens are looking better, and they're not so sharp and contrasty. And then I took the saturation down, because the petals were still a little bit too saturated. So by pulling that saturation down, now I'm starting to see that come back where it looks a little bit better now. So I'm feeling pretty good, because I'm thinking I might be able to save this image from that disaster right there. I'm able to kind of pull it back a little bit. So that worked out pretty good. All right, so we click on our OK, takes us back into our elements program, but I need to work on this because there are some areas that I want to make adjustments in. In other words, because the light is coming from overhead straight down, this area is in the shade, so that's a little bit darker, and this is a little bit brighter. So I want to balance out the light between the two flowers with the petals, and then also I want to, this one over here, because it's being shaded from overhead, is a little darker than the one on the right, so I want to adjust that too. So again, I go into my Viveza program and make those simple adjustments. All right, so we're going to go back to our control points. And I'm going to drop control point on this area right here, and then I'm going to take my circle, so it just kind of covers that little stretch of petals right along here. And then we're going to go down here and just brighten that area up. See, I said bright is not right. That's much better. And then over here, I can go in and darken some of this little area down by adding the control point right in here. And like I said, if you're using a lot of control points, you might want to go and name them, so you can always refer back to them. But I don't use a ton of control points, so I don't name any of mine. And so we're going to darken that one down a little bit. So now you can see the area here and this area here is a little bit more balanced. This color, let me see if I can maybe pull out a little more saturation in there. I'm gonna hit that warmth slider and see if I can change that. It looks a little orangey in there. Yeah, they're a little bit better. All right, now this head over here is again being shaded from the light overhead, so I want to lighten that one up. Grab a control point, drop it right in here, and that's pretty good as far as the circle. Now I'm gonna brighten this up, but I'm also going to pull out some of the texture that's in there, and I'm going to use the structure slider, and that's going to really pull out, some of the texture. You don't want to go too much on it, but you just want to add a little bit of texture in there. Oops, I'm sorry. Using saturation. That one below it is the one I want. I was wondering why it changed color. Structure. Okay, so you could see you could really get a lot of structure in that, but we don't want to get it crazy. So we just want to add a little bit of structure in there. And then this side over here, I want to just kind of darken that one down. So again, a control point. And just bring it into that area. take the brightness slider. So again, this is really cool. I'm able to make these simple adjustments so easily. All right, now let me go back this one. That one looks like I over brightened it. There we go. Oh, I want to add some structure in there too. You just open it back up, go back into your sliders and pull a little bit more structure. Now the background you can see is kind of a little on the blotchy side, right? And what's cool about that structure slider is if I drop a control point in this area right here and then take the circle out so that it takes in the whole image all the way to the top. And then I can take that structure slider and I can slide it all the way to the left. See, if I go to the right, it pulls out the texture. If I take it to the left, it can actually smooth out that. So you can see it's actually smoothed out all that nice texture that was in there. So now when we compare it, you can see the difference in the lightening up that top right flower and then darkening down a little bit on the left and then adjusting the sepals underneath here. All right, so that was step 2. Now the next step when I finish this off would be to come in here now and just let's do this with the clone. I can come in here, hit the Alt button, copy that, just pull it up here. You can see there's some debris that was in the flower there, or I mean the stepple, and I can just come in here and kind of play around. And then this guy here, if I want to clone that out, get rid of that. I'm not going to take too much time messing with this. I normally would take a little more time on it, but anyways, you get the point. So we would, if we remove the Viveza up here, we would have that. That was with the bleach bypass, and then we remove the bleach bypass and we have that disastrous looking image there. So I was able to bring that back by using the bleach bypass in Color Efex and then the Viveza. Another one I use is tonal contrast. So if I have something like this, I photographed this because I like that white colored fern that was behind the green, and why that one was like that, I don't know why that one turned white, but it was pretty cool. So there's another one that if you have images like this called tonal contrast. And again, you'll get 3 or 4 options under there. So you can go through and hit these different options. And I think this is the one I liked right there. So you can see from the original how it really makes that contrast pop, and colors just kind of really on the greens really pop against the white, makes the white whiter and the greens stand out more. So I've used that before on images that I have a good strong contrast that I want to emphasize. All right, now there's another one that I want to show you here. Is a really cool filter too. You know, some of these filters, when I started to, look at all the different filters, I thought, well, that's a filter I'll never use. And then all of a sudden you bring in an image and you start scrolling through the filters and wow, that worked really good on this one image, And I have people that'll say that, will say, well, what image did you use on, or what filter did you use on that? And I'll say, well, I used this filter, but it's the only image I've ever found that filter worked on. And it's kind of like that Solarization filter. And this one here, again, is by color user defined. is one of those filters that I just would never ever think I would have used. It's a 2-color, split screen type 2-color thing, and I thought, when would I would ever use that? And so when I was, I pulled this image in and I started to click through the filters. I got to the bicolor user define. I go, whoa, that's kind of cool looking, because water's blue and here's the blue, but yeah, you get this maybe warm, sunlight, that's early morning sun or something that might be hitting the water down below here and turning it into a little different tone. Now up top here, you see you have opacity, so you can add just a little bit in, or you could add a lot in. So we're going to leave it right about there. And then a blending mode, which will blend them. All right, and then a vertical shift. Now, what I found, which was really cool, was they have a rotation slider here, and that's when it really worked well. See, I can rotate it. And so then I says, you know what? There's this line of rocks right here, this line, and that's going to work out really cool, where I can rotate that color so that I get the blue on the top portion here, and then down here I get the gold. And I thought that is really cool how that worked. And again, this is the only image that I've ever used it on, but for this particular image it worked really well. So you can change the colors too. So you've got here color selector, so you can go through here, you can pick out any color you want, click OK, and it'll change the color. You've got the which you see here, it says upper color, which is the blue, and then the lower color. So you can alter the colors if you find an image that this is going to work for you. You can change the colors to whatever you want. This just is the default colors that pop up when I actually thought they were perfect for this image. The kind of the gold color, like I say, maybe warm sunlight in the morning or evening hitting the water, and then the blue color from the water, from maybe a sky overhead reflecting. So we're going to hit OK, and then that's going to apply that in my elements. Now, just like I showed you on other images, I want to go in here and make some adjustments. This rock here is a little bit dark and this one's a little bit light, and I just want to kind of adjust those two rocks there. Also, I want to show you something else that's new in the Viveza that's going to help you to, and you'll see in this image is a good example what I'm talking about. When I place my control point on this dark rock here, and you remember what I said earlier, that when you drop that control point and you make that circle, whatever's in that circle is going to be affected. So in this rock, it's kind of a blackish color I'm dropping it on, and there's also black in this area right here. So if I adjust this rock, I'm also, because it's in the circle, I'm also going to affect this water here. Now, we're going to lighten this rock up. All right, and I'm also going to add some structure in here to kind of pull out some details in that rock. All right, now what happened is I also affected the water here. So if you go back, you can see how the water's black, and now it's kind of lighting that area up. Now in the past, you could actually just take another control point and drop it right in here, and it would actually lock it back to the original color. But what they did in the new Viveza 4 is they added these two sliders here. One's called luminance and chrominance. Chrominance, I think it is. That's how you pronounce it. All right, now if you go to your control point and you click on this little box over on the right here, it shows the area that's being affected. Okay, so in other words, I drop my control point here, and this is the area I'm affecting, but you can see it's also bleeding into this area up here. So what they did in the new version is they add this luminance slider here, which when we slide this over and slide the chrominance or chromance, we can see how we can kind of eliminate that area up in there and just concentrate on the area we drop the control point by playing with these luminance things. All right, so that's a way that now you can adjust the area that you want, and you can bring it in to pinpoint the area you want by using these two sliders here. Whereas in the past, like I said, you couldn't, you weren't able to do that. You could actually drop a second control point and it might lock it back to the original color, but this is a little more precise where we can get in there and really bring it into those areas there. So we go ahead and click that off, and now the water's back to the original color because I've used those two sliders there and it just brought it into this area of the rock. This one here is the same problem as the other one. Now this is, you know, a light color, but we also have light color that's in the water up and above here. So again, if I go to adjust that slider and darken that rock down, I'm actually affecting the water that's above and below it also. And I'm going to add some structure in here to pull out more detail in that rock too. All right, so our water kind of toned down. I don't know if we'll be able to see it. Tone the water down a little bit. And so we're going to go into the luminance. Whoops, I'm sorry, hang on a second here. I got to click that little box there so we can see what we're affecting. There we go. Now you can see how it's affecting up in here and down in here. That's the main area we want, but it's also bleeding into these other areas, and that's where we're going to go ahead and tone that, pull that into that area right there. See? Now we know that we're not affecting that water up and above with those two sliders, and that's the thing that they've added into this new 4 program, that you can really pinpoint the area, whereas before it would bleed into other areas. All right, so we're gonna click that one off. All right, so then I might at the end, I might go in here and just, you know, pull in a little more contrast in there, maybe a little more structure, pull out more details. Look at the details you can pull out with that structure slider. It's kind of like detail extractor almost. And then maybe saturation, maybe back it off a little bit. Now that blue is pretty intense up there, so I might take a control point, drop it on the blue, and then soften that blue down by just going into my saturation and just backing off saturation on there. There, that's a little better. And I could do the same with the gold down here if I wanted to make adjustment. So we can apply that and then go back into our elements, applies that, and again, made the adjustments I wanted to. So if we go back up in here, our layers here, we see there's what we did in Viveza, and then there's the bicolor user defined. So this image, when I pulled it out of the camera and looked at this, I thought, it's pretty bland looking. I don't think there's much I'm going to be able to do with this, you know, because it's all the color and everything is all just blue. So that bicolor user defined was really cool for that filter. Again, you know, someone might say, well, what filter did you use? And I tell them, but you may not be able to find another image where that particular filter would work with your image. This is another thing I just want to point out here that is in Viveza. So I showed you the control point where I want to adjust, say, just the center of this flower right here. I want to brighten that area up right there, okay? And then let's say I went and dropped another control point over here, and you know, all 3 of these images or flowers are the same in the center. And what I want to do is I want to group these 3 together. So in my, let's see, it's the control button on my keyboard. I can go up here, hit that one and that one. So now you see these 3 are open together. And then over on the right side, you can go to this little box down here, and you can, those 3 right there that you see, groups them into group 1. So all 3 of them are grouped together in group 1, and then you can name it, of course. And then you can go in here and adjust all 3 of them at the same time. So you can kind of group control points. Again, just I hit the control button on my thing, and I can hit all 3 of the ones, and then just go into this little box right here and hit that, and that will combine them into a group 1. And then you can go ahead, double click like I show, and then you can name it if you wanted to name it. So I wanted to point that out, how you can group control points together and adjust them all together.
Hey, Mike, that's a great tip. Really appreciate it. We're at the top of the hour now.
Okay.
I was wondering if maybe you could take just a couple questions before we close out.
Sure.
Okay, so the very first one was
went fast, didn't it?
It sure did. Love your images, by the way. I always
Thanks.
have. Several people were asking what camera and lenses do you use for your macro work?
Yeah, so you know, I've always used inexpensive camera bodies, and the reason why I do is because about 60% of the people that come in my workshops are using cameras under $1,000. So, you know, I've been asked like, how come you're not using the $6,500 Pro camera from Nikon? I said, well, because you know, if I use that camera, those people in my workshops would be leaving the workshop saying, well, Mike's images look really good because he's got a professional camera. So the cameras that I've always used have been under $1,000. I was using the D7000 camera. I used that for about 8 or 9 years, and I wanted to get an articulating LCD, and so I ended up, you know, just last fall purchasing the Nikon 7500, which again, I think it only sold for $899. And that's just to show people in my workshops that you don't have to have an expensive camera for macro photography. Now, that doesn't mean that, you know, that would be a good camera for other types of photography, but for macro, anything, a $500 entry level camera will work great. Okay, so you don't have to have an expensive camera. Now the lenses I use, I am sponsored by Tamron, so they provide me with the two that I use, which is the 90mm Tamron macro lens, that is, and then I use the 18-400, which a lot of these new zoom lenses nowadays actually have what they call macro capabilities. Now, not one-to-one macro capabilities, but it'll be a 1 to 2.9, 1 to 3.5, something like that. And you can still shoot into a pretty small area. I've got it down to about 1.5 inches by about 2.5 inches that I can shoot into with that 18-400. So a lot of the images I shoot is with an 18-400, but a lot of my macro stuff, you know, the close-ups and that are all done with the 90mm Tamron.
Okay, great. Let's see here. We've got a question from Frank who is asking, are your JPEGs basically flat out of the camera, or do you
Yes.
use other camera control settings?
No, you know, like I say, the white balance is probably the most important. Why I messed up on that one image that I told you, the white balance was, you know, was probably on cloudy mode, and I was shooting under fluorescent lighting. That's why it screwed it up so bad, and why I didn't see that, I don't know. But that's pretty much the only thing I need to adjust. Now, there's different settings for JPEGs, which I'm using what's called the fine mode, and that's the highest level of JPEG that comes out of the camera. But the thing about macro photography is we very rarely run into high dynamic range images. Most of the time, my images that I shoot, I get a perfect exposure out of the camera typically. So I don't have a lot of high dynamic range where I need to go and make a lot of adjustments to that image. Whereas, say, a landscape photographer, they would shoot JPEGs for sure because they have a really high dynamic range and bright skies and dark green trees in the foregrounds that turn black when it comes out of the camera. And so they have to go in there and make a lot of adjustments in the exposure of different areas of that image. So for, say, landscape photography, you know, JPEGs don't work as well because you can't make quite as much as those adjustments in the exposures of different areas, whereas a raw file will allow you to control those much better. But for macro photography, I say I very rarely ever run into high dynamic range. It's pretty rare. So when I shoot my images, they always come out pretty much perfectly exposed throughout the image, so I don't have to do a lot of adjustments typically. Now I will go, like you saw in Viveza, and maybe hit certain areas, just pull a little bit. But as you can see, I was able to make adjustments in brightening areas and darkening areas down when I needed to. So, but yeah, the JPEGs, I really just use the white balance. I make sure I try to get my white balance correct, and then use the fine mode.
Okay, well, everyone, if you want to see more of Mike's work, go to his website, which is Tiny Landscapes. He also does workshops. I've been to one of his workshops in San Diego. It was a lot of fun. And they fill up pretty fast from what I remember. And I think it
Yeah.
still is happening now. So
Yeah, and
be
I
sure to check
started
it out.
a macro photo club 3 years ago, and it's a video program that has 252 videos, instructional videos, covers 4 categories. So it covers post-processing, it covers tips from the field, equipment, and composition. And we have over 2,300 members now from 25 different countries. It's amazing.
That's great.
So that's something, when you get to my website at the top, you'll see a link that says Macro Photo Club if you're interested in joining that.
Okay, great. Well, Mike, thank you very much for this wonderful presentation. I want to thank everybody else for joining us today, and hope that we will see you again, Mike. This has been
Sure.
fun.
All right. Thanks,
All right.
Laura, having me on, and thanks for those who attended.
Yep. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day. Bye-bye.